immediately with our first performer. He's standing ready to start a very close personal friend, Mr. Ogutu Muraya. Give him a warm round of applause.
The year is 2007. The month is November. I am walking through the corridors of my university, broke and tired, and I see a notice board. And on it, an A4 pink poster with a sign saying, "Tell a story for 7 minutes and you could win 2,000 shillings, which is about 20 euros. And I pull out my notebook, I find a quiet corner in the campus, and I write my first ever story called The Pumpkin Festival. In this story, plants gather every so often together in the farmland, and once they gather on the Pumpkin Festival, they decide on which pumpkin is the wisest, smartest, most intelligent pumpkin that would get to sit on the throne of the scarecrow as the head of the scarecrow to protect the farm from birds. But in my stories, the plants could not agree on which pumpkin to settle, and the trees brought in an issue. They said, hey, but if we are shaped nicely and our branches stretched out, we can be the scarecrow. Why does it always have to be pumpkins? And the legumes said, hey, but also us, if you take enough of us together, stuff us right nice, put us in a nice position, we can also be a scarecrow. And chaos followed, and no one could agree on anything, and the head of the throne, the pumpkin, was not put, and so there was no scarecrow. Birds invaded, chaos, famine. You get the picture. Now, 2 months later, actually less than 2 months later, Kenya went into a general elections. The results were disputed, and after this, the country descended into civil war. And one of the companies, a publishing company in Kenya, that was tired about the news reportings that were going around during the violence, decided to bring together a group of storytellers so that rather than sending out journalists into affected regions, they would send out storytellers in order to get personal stories from the affected people. And so I was commissioned, and I traveled. And then, a few months into the violence, the UN and the African Union moved in, and the conflict was settled, and a peace deal was signed. But this whole event changed my life. And I remember writing another story at the time from my visits in internal displaced camps. It was dedicated at the time to women, because women and children, often in conflict, are the ones who are most affected. I saw a woman gracefully seated on a rock by the river. She was in her 40s, a strong woman indeed, calm and peaceful she seemed. I was oblivious of the internal storm brewing inside of her, a raging storm with a persistent fury and wrath, the kind that shreds apart at the very core of her being. I was blind to all these. All I saw, what I saw, was a woman gracefully seated on a rock by the river. She does not speak, she does not move a muscle, she does not attract any attention to herself. She simply sits motionless, intensely staring at her reflection as the river gently flowed by. I walked up to her, but stopped when I noticed every aspect of her body language screaming, "Go away! Leave me alone. I just want to be alone." I was puzzled and posed, but my mind, paved with perversive curiosity, gripped the better part of me, so I kept walking, and soon I sat beside her on a rock by the river like a cheeky child, curious and demanding attention. She breaks away from my intense stare and acknowledges my presence, but does not say a word to me. Silence. Then she turns to me and stares at me straight in the eye and says, "A river never flows on the same spot twice." Now, what does it mean? Is it a saying? Is it a riddle? Is it a sign? Maybe it's a sign that she doesn't want me to speak to her, that she wants me to go. Or then again, she might have just invited me into a conversation. Oh, my mind is now confused, running around. But then she speaks some more, easing my self-indulgence. I, a stranger to her, and she, a stranger to me, yet nonetheless her story she tells. She begins, 40 years I've lived in this country. 40 years of walked, talked on these lands. 40 years of creating through dreams when others saw them as mere fantasies. 40 years of giving life meaning and vivacity, yet it took one day to lose it all, lose it to politicians drunk with power and young men drunk with opinion and hate. As she spoke, her tear ducts swelled like a flooding riverbank, and tears flowed gently on her cheeks and plopped into the river, creating a ripple effect that momentarily distorts her reflection of her image. And she reacts with anger, her hands clenched into a fist, her eyes bloodshot red, as though ready to strike at her own reflection, her own image. Slowly, she calms down as the ripple effect fades away. Words of comfort crisscross my mind. I wanted to tell her it'll be okay. I wanted to tell her I'm here for you. I wanted to tell her not to be afraid. I wanted to tell her, yet none of these words went past my throat. Instead, I just sat there on a rock by the river, staring at her. And in that moment, the clouds above us gathered and raindrops started to drop one by one. And as the raindrops mingled with the tears on her face and washed away the anger and the frustration, I came to understand that sometimes silence is comfort enough. Her next words, she speaks ever so gently, that tenderness of a mother talking to her child. She says to me, "What does it mean, this strange language of one?" For many, one means unanimity, unity, union, unison, coming together, one voice, one nation, one people. For me, one means solitude, single, solo, isolation, to be alone, to be forgotten. We sat for a few more minutes together and then parted our ways. And as I was walking, I pondered long and heard her words, "A river never flows on the same spot twice." I came to understand what I hope you will now know, that the river was a metaphor for time. And time, like the river, never flows on the same spot twice.